1 Kings 4. So King Solomon was king over all Israel. These were his ministers: Asariah, son of Sadok the Cohen, Elihoreph and Ahijah, sons of Shisha, scribes, Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, the secretary, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army, Sadok and Abiathar, Kohanim, Asariah, son of Nathan, over the commissioners, Sabud, son of Nathan, a senior minister, a friend of the king, Ahishar, the chamberlain, and Adoniram, son of Abda, over the taxes. Solomon had 12 commissioners over all of Israel, who sustained the king and his household. Each one sustained him 1 month out of the year. These were their names: the son of Hur at Mount Ephraim, the son of Dekar at Makaz, Shaalbim, Bethshemesh, and Elon Beth-Hanan, the son of Hesed at Aruboth. He was in charge of Soko and the entire land of Hefer. The son of Abinadab was in charge of the entire Dor district. Taphath, daughter of Solomon, became his wife. Bana, son of Ahilud, at Tanash and Megiddo, and all of Beth-Shean, which is near Zarathon, below Jezreel, from Beth-Shean until the plain of Meholah, until beyond Jokmeam. The son of Geber at Ramoth-Gilead. He was in charge of the villages of Jair, son of Manasseh, in the Gilead. And he was in charge of the Argob region, which is in the Bashan, 60 great cities, with walls and copper bars. Ahinadab, son of Edu, at Mahanaim, Ahimaaz, and Naphtali. He also married Basemath, daughter of Solomon. Bana, son of Hushai, in Asher, and in Be-Aloth. Jehoshaphat, son of Paruah, in Issachar. Shimei, son of Elah, in Benjamin. Geber, son of Uri, in the land of Gilead, in the land of Sihon, king of the Amorite, and of Og, king of Bashan, and one main commissioner who was over the entire land. Judah and Israel were numerous, like the sand that is by the sea for multitude, eating, drinking, and rejoicing. 1 Kings 5. Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms, from the Euphrates River to the land of the Philistines, until the border of Egypt. They brought tributes and served Solomon all the days of his life. Solomon's provision for 1 day was 30 kor of fine flour, 60 kor of flour, 10 fattened oxen, 20 oxen from the pasture, and 100 sheep and goats, besides gazelle, deer, yashmer, and fattened fowl. For he ruled over the entire area beyond the Euphrates River, from Tifsa to Gaza, over all the kings of the area beyond the Euphrates River, and he was at peace with the lands on all sides, round about. Judah and Israel dwelt in tranquility, each man under his grapevine and under his fig tree, from Dan to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots, and 12,000 horsemen. These commissioners sustained King Solomon, and all who came to King Solomon's table, each in his assigned month. They did not leave anything lacking. The barley and straw for the horses and the speedy mounts, they would bring to whatever place they were quartered, each one providing it according to his responsibility. God gave wisdom and considerable understanding to Solomon, and breadth of heart as immense as the sand which is upon the seashore. Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, and Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal. His fame spread to all the nations around him. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. He spoke of the trees, from the cedar which is in Lebanon down to the hyssop which grows out of the wall. He spoke of animal, of fowl, of crawling creature, and of fish. They came from all the nations to hear the wisdom of Solomon, emissaries from all the kings of the land who had heard of his wisdom. Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon, for he had heard that he had been anointed king in place of his father. For Hiram had always been a friend of David. Solomon sent back to Hiram, saying, "You knew that my father David was not able to build a house for the name of Hashem, his God, because of the war that surrounded him, until Hashem would subdue our enemies under the soles of my feet. And now Hashem, my God, has granted me rest on all sides. There is no adversary and no misfortune. Therefore, I have decided to build a house for the name of Hashem, my God, as Hashem spoke to my father David, saying, Your son, whom I shall place upon your throne in your stead, he will build a house for my name. And now, command your servants that they cut down cedars for me from the Lebanon. My servants will be with your servants, and I will provide you with the wages of your servants according to whatever you say. For you know that we have no one who knows how to hew down trees like the Sidonians. And it was when Hiram heard the words of Solomon, he was very glad and said, Blessed is Hashem this day, who has granted David a wise son to rule over his numerous people. Hiram sent a message to Solomon, saying, I received what you sent me. I shall do all that you desire, with cedar wood and cypress wood. My servants will bring the logs down from the Lebanon to the sea. I will make them into rafts on the sea, to go to the place that you shall appoint for me. I will dismantle them there, and you will carry them away. And you do what I desire, providing food for my household. Hiram would give Solomon cedar wood and cypress wood, as much as he desired. And Solomon would give Hiram 20,000 kor of wheat as sustenance for his household, and 20 kor of squeezed oil. This is what Solomon would give Hiram year by year. Hashem gave wisdom to Solomon, and he had spoken to him. There was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them sealed a covenant. King Solomon imposed a levy from all of Israel. The levy consisted of 30,000 men. He sent them to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 each month. For 1 month they would be in Lebanon, and for 2 months each would be at home. Adoniram was in charge of the levy. Solomon had 70,000 who carried burdens and 80,000 who hewed in the mountain, in addition to Solomon's 3,300 chief officers who were appointed over the work, who directed the people performing the work. The king commanded, and they quarried great stones, heavy stones, to lay the foundation of the temple with hewn stones. The builders of Solomon, the builders of Hiram, and the Gebalites carved the stones, and they prepared the wood and the stones to build the temple. 1 Kings 6. In the 480th year after the children of Israel's exodus from the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, he built the temple for Hashem. The temple that King Solomon built for Hashem, 60 cubits was its length, 20 cubits was its width, and 30 cubits was its height. The hall in front of the sanctuary of the temple, 20 cubits was its length across the width of the temple, and 10 cubits its width in front of the temple. He made narrowing windows for the temple. Against the wall of the temple, he built an annex all around, built into the walls of the temple all around the sanctuary and the inner sanctum. And he made cells all around. The lowest story of the annex, its width was 5 cubits. The middle story, 6 cubits its width. And the third story, 7 cubits its width. For he had provided recesses around the outside of the wall of the temple in order not to penetrate the walls of the temple. When the temple was being built, it was built of complete quarried stone. Hammers, chisels, or any iron utensils were not heard in the temple when it was being built. The entrance to the central ground level cell was at the south side of the temple, and they would ascend on winding stairs to the middle story, and from the middle story to the third. He built the temple and completed it. He made the temple ceiling of decorative wooden panels under cedar planks. He built the annex along the entire temple. 5 cubits was its height, and he covered the house with cedar wood. The word of Hashem then came to Solomon, saying, This temple that you build, if you follow my decrees, perform my statutes, and observe all my commandments, to follow them, I shall uphold my word with you that I spoke to David your father. I shall dwell among the children of Israel, and I shall not forsake my people Israel. Solomon had built the temple and finished it. He built the walls of the temple on the inside with cedar boards. From the temple floor to the ceiling beams, he overlaid it with wood on the inside. He also overlaid the temple floor with cypress boards. He built an overlay for the 20 cubits at the rear of the temple of cedar boards, from the floor to the beams, and he prepared this area inside the partition to be the Holy of Holies. The temple was 40 cubits long, that is, the sanctuary at the front. The cedar upon the temple on the inside was decorated with a network of designs of knobs and blossoming flowers. Everything was covered with cedarwood. Stone was not visible. He prepared an inner sanctum in the temple toward the inside, there to place the Ark of the Covenant of Hashem. Behind the partition was an area 20 cubits in length and 20 cubits in width and 20 cubits its height. He overlaid the partition with fine gold. He also overlaid an altar with cedar wood. Solomon then overlaid the inner section of the temple with fine gold, and he drew golden chains in front of the partition, and he overlaid it with gold. He then overlaid the whole temple with gold until the entire temple was completely overlaid. The whole altar that stood opposite the entrance of the inner sanctum he overlaid with gold. In the inner sanctum he made 2 cherubim out of olive wood, each one, its height, 10 cubits, and 5 cubits the one wing of the cherub, and 5 cubits the second wing of the cherub, 10 cubits from the edge of its one wing to the edge of its other wing. The other cherub was also 10 cubits, one size and one form for the 2 cherubim. The height of one cherub was 10 cubits, and so the second cherub. He put the cherubim inside the inner chamber, and they spread out the cherubim's wings. The wing of one touched the wall, and the wing of the other touched the second wall, and their other wings, which were in the center of the chamber, were touching wing to wing. He overlaid the cherubim with gold. All the walls of the temple were surrounded by designs, an engraved network of figures of cherubim and palms and blossoming flowers in the inside chamber and in the outside chamber. He overlaid the floor of the temple with gold also, and in the inner chamber and in the outer chamber. For the entrance of the inner sanctum, he made doors of olive wood. The door frame was 5-sided, and 2 doors of olive wood, upon which he engraved designs of cherubim, palms, and blossoming flowers, and he overlaid them with gold. He pressed the gold over the cherubim and the palms. He also made doorposts of olive wood for the entrance of the sanctuary, which were 4-sided, and 2 doors of cypress wood, with 2 rounded hinges for the one door and 2 rounded hinges for the second door. He then engraved on the doors designs of cherubim and palms of blossoming flowers, and he overlaid them with gold, which was flattened over the engraved designs. Then he built a wall around the inner courtyard, 3 rows of hewn stone and a row of cedar beams. In Solomon's 4th year, the foundation of the temple of Hashem was laid in the month of Ziv. And in the 11th year, in the month of Bul, which is the 8th month, the temple was completed according to all its particulars and all its specifications. He built it over 7 years. 1 Kings 7. His own palace Solomon built over 13 years, and he finished his entire palace. He built the house of the forest of Lebanon, 100 cubits its length, 50 cubits its width, and 30 cubits its height, over 4 rows of cedar pillars, with cedar beams over the pillars. It was roofed with cedar overhead. Upon the boards that were atop the pillars, there were 45 boards, 15 per row. There were also 3 rows of windows, opening opposite opening, 3 times. All the doorways and doorposts had 4-sided frames. They were aligned, opening opposite opening, 3 times. He made a hall for the building of pillars, 50 cubits its length, and 30 cubits its width. The hall was situated in front of the doors of the building. It had its own pillars with a thick beam upon them. He made a hall for the throne where he would judge, a hall of judgment. It was covered with cedar wood from one end of the floor to the other. His house where he would live, which was in another courtyard beyond the hall, was of the same construction. He also made a house like this for the daughter of Pharaoh, whom Solomon had taken as a wife. All these were built of valuable stones, the size of hewn stones, filed smooth with a file, and on the inside and on the outside and from the foundation to the ceiling, and outdoors until the great courtyard. It was founded upon valuable stones, large stones, stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits. But above ground there were valuable stones the size of hewn stones and cedar. The great courtyard all around, the king's buildings, its walls were made of 3 rows of hewn stone and a row of cedar boards, as was done for the inner courtyard of the temple of Hashem, and for the hall of the temple. King Solomon sent and took Hiram from Tyre. He was the son of a widowed woman from the tribe of Naphtali. His father had been a Tyrian coppersmith. He was full of the wisdom, the insight, and the knowledge to do all sorts of work with copper. So he came to King Solomon and performed all his work. He designed the 2 pillars of copper, 18 cubits the height of the one pillar, and a 12-cubit string could go around it. And likewise for the second pillar. He made 2 capitals to place upon the top of the pillars of molten copper, 5 cubits the height of the one capital, and 5 cubits the height of the second capital. There were nettings of meshwork and ropes of chainwork on the capitals that were upon the pillars. 7 designs for the one capital, and 7 for the second capital. He made the pillars. He placed 2 rows going all around upon the one netting, to cover the capitals that were on top, with the pomegranates. And he did likewise for the second capital. On the capitals that were atop the pillars was a molded flower, as in the hall. They were 4 cubits high. And there were capitals on the 2 pillars, also on top opposite the bulge that was at the edge of the netting. There were 200 pomegranate figures, arranged in rows all around, and likewise for the second capital. He erected the pillars by the hall of the sanctuary. He erected the right pillar and called its name Jashin, establish. And he erected the left pillar and called its name Boaz, strength is in it. Upon the top of the pillars was placed a flowered figure, and the work of the pillars was complete. He made the sea of cast metal, 10 cubits from its one rim to its other rim, circular all around, 5 cubits its height. A 30-cubit line could encircle it all around. There were knobs under its rim all around, surrounding it, 10 cubits in length, girdling the sea all around, 2 rows of the knobs, which were cast with the casting of the sea. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea was on top of them, and their hunches were toward the center of the sea. Its thickness was 1 handbreadth. Its rim was like the rim of a cup, with a rose blossom design. Its capacity was 2,000 bath measures. He then made 10 copper stands, 4 cubits the length of each stand, 4 cubits its width, and 3 cubits its height. This is the workmanship of the stands. They had frames, and more frames between the rods, and on the frames which were between the rods were engraved lions, oxen, and cherubim. There was a base upon the rods, above them. Under the lions and the oxen were the braces of hammered metal. There were 4 copper wheels to each stand, and copper boards that had shafts at their 4 corners. The shafts were cast under the basin, opposite each of the embracing couples. The opening of the base extended from inside the capital of the stand 1 cubit upward. Its opening was round, like the shape of the stand, 1.5 cubits. There were designs upon the rim also. The frames were square, not circular. As for the 4 wheels that were under the frames, the axles of the wheels were built into the stand, and the height of each wheel was 1.5 cubits. The workmanship of the wheels was like the workmanship of the chariot's wheel. Their axles, their hubs, their rims, and their spokes were all made of cast copper. There were 4 shafts at the 4 corners of each stand. From the stand its shafts came. At the top of the stand, the 1/2 cubit of height was circular, all around. And on the top of the stand its rods and its frames were from it. And he engraved upon the tablets of its boards and upon its frames cherubim, lions, and palms, like a man's embracing couples all around. Thus he did for the 10 stands, 1 casting, 1 measure, 1 form for all of them. He then made 10 copper lavers. Each laver had a capacity of 40 bath measures. Each laver was 4 cubits high. There was 1 laver for each of the 10 stands. He placed the stands, 5 at the side of the temple to the right, and 5 at the side of the temple to its left. And he placed the sea at the right side of the temple, eastward, opposite the south. Hiram made the pots, the shovels, and the bowls. And Hiram finished doing all the work that he did for King Solomon for the temple of Hashem. 2 pillars, the 2 basins of the capitals that were on top of the pillars, the 2 nettings to cover the 2 basins of the capitals that were on top of the pillars, the pomegranates, 400 for the 2 nettings, 2 rows of pomegranates for each netting to cover the 2 basins of the capitals that were on top of the pillars, the 10 stands and the 10 lavers upon the stands, the 1 sea and the 12 bulls under the sea, the pots, the shovels, the bowls, and all the vessels that Hiram had made for King Solomon for the temple of Hashem, all made from pure copper. The king cast them in the plain of the Jordan, in firm clay, between Sukkoth and Savarthan. Solomon set aside all the vessels, because there were so very, very many. The weight of the copper could not be determined. And Solomon made all the furnishings for the temple of Hashem, the golden altar, the table upon which was the showbread of gold, the candelabra, 5 on the right and 5 on the left, placed in front of the inner sanctum of fine gold, with their flowers, lamps, and tongs of gold. The jugs, musical instruments, bowls, spoons, and pans were of fine gold, and the hinge sockets of the doors of the inner house, the Holy of Holies, and those doors of the temple, that is, the sanctuary, of gold. When all the work that King Solomon had done for the temple of Hashem was completed, Solomon brought that which his father had sanctified, the silver, the gold, and the articles, and placed them in the treasuries of the temple of Hashem. Well, hello, welcome back. Okay, so 480 years after Moses took these guys out of Egypt, Abraham is your father, there's a promised land, follow me, and they do it 480 years after this event, which these guys celebrate every year with this Passover. Their descendants build a temple to Hashem. As one would expect, given the condition of the temporary traveling tabernacle, this place is out of this world, literally covered in gold. So this group of people now constitute the sovereign nation of Israel. Its borders are extremely well defended. Everybody in the whole world knows about Israel because of King David. And they know about King David because King David was all about knowing God. Right now, the wisest man in the whole world is ruling this land. And it is super, super, super rich. So, what do you think the people are thinking? Are all of these people pointing to God's hand for this unprecedented success? The documented history of this group of people is a history of rebellion. So has all of this wealth made them docile? And are they now obedient? Certainly Solomon is going to know Hashem. As king, he is required to write 2 copies of the Torah. And he's supposed to keep one of these Torah scrolls on his person every single day. Plus, he is the son of King David of Israel. This is a whole nother thing. And look, he came into this world with a bit of prophecy, a bit of, the hand of God kind of stuff. But are all the dads in Israel like David, teaching their kids about the, God and praying to the Lord and all this sort of stuff? No, no, they're not. So what did it mean to the nation as a whole that Solomon built this temple to God? Do the people of Israel know and understand what this temple is, what it's for? Do they all agree? So it takes 7 years to build this thing, and it takes 14 years to build Solomon's personal house, the house of the forest of Lebanon. Now, the house is twice the size of the temple, and its foundation is cut from precious stone. Listen, Solomon's house is made out of jewelry, and the house of God is made out of gold. Now, what does this tell you? Where I live, there are 3 church buildings under construction. And I estimate the cost of these construction projects to be between, say, $12 and $15 million each. And this is on the low end. And once these buildings are complete, there will be 47 church buildings in the area. So I have a choice where I want to go. It ranges from rough and tough to absolutely spectacular, the laser shows and the smoke, you wouldn't even believe the production value you get. And I have a choice. In ancient Israel, this was the only building with God's name on it. There was a big deal about God resting his name on one building. Thank you for watching. That's it for now. The NQE is out.